Ladies and gentlemen, I excuse myself that we are late, but believe me, in this European Parliament terms, we are really early starting our meeting. There are still people coming in, that is due to their strong security arrangements of European Parliament, but I hope they will reach us on time. And I will take a lot of time by introducing so they can move in slowly. About myself, I am Riho Terras, a member of the European Parliament since 2020. I was the happy one to join after the Brits left the House, so therefore 20, not 19. I was 30 years soldier, last years 2011 to 2018 I was the Chief of Defense of Estonia. I was also president of Estonian Shooting Association for 8 years, where we first time met many years ago. And today I am here in the Parliament as a vice president of, vice chair of the Committee of Security and Defense. That said, I also have a hobby. This is called the vice president of the European Parliament's intergroup of biodiversity hunting and countryside. So that is actually what is my passion. I have been shooting around all my life, even in Iraq. I have been dealing with the shooting sports and hunting for the last 30 years. So I hope I know what I'm talking about. And I really follow this lead ammunition file closely. I have asked several parliamentary questions and written open letters to Commission on this topic. So I'm really happy that you are gathered in that really impressive numbers, and I hope we will have a very balanced and informed discussion about this very important topic, which concerns really many areas across different sectors and communities. Several sectors are affected, including hunters, sport shooters, industry collectors, retailers, and dealers. Of course, the EU defense priorities are a key part of my discussion every day, which has led to the long delay in the advancing file within the EU REACH Committee. First, we will have a keynote speaker from the European Commission, then an expert contribution from Dr. Ruth Cromie, right pronunciation? Yeah, okay, sorry, it's not that easy, who worked extensively on this file within the European Chemical Agency. A presentation from AFAMS, the Association of European Manufacturers of Sporting Ammunition, is delivered by Mr. Terry Jacobs. A presentation by Mr. Luciano Rossi, President of the International Shooting Sport Federation, is representing the sport shooting sector. After all the key speakers have presented, we will open floor for the questions and discussions. I really hope that it will be a fruitful discussion, and all this discussion is also live streamed and people are connected through the modern means of connection, also having possibility to take part of the discussion and ask questions. So, as of now, I start with our first speaker from European Commission. I'm pleased to invite Mrs. Valentina Bertato from the European Commission DG Environment to provide a 15-minute overview of the state of play and the Commission's perspective on the restriction. Mrs. Bertato, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting the Commission to present the proposal for a restriction on lead in ammunition, and thank you also to FACE for the organization. So my presentation will start with an explanation on why we have a discussion on this restriction, why we are proposing a restriction. Then I will try to go through the major points of the restriction to explain how it is framed and how it is organized. And then at the end, I will address a few points that have been raised several times in the discussion with the member states. And I will also give a short update on the next steps. So starting on the reason why we need a restriction. So you probably know that lead has been restricted for several uses, and some of these already for several years. Fuel and paints are the main one. These were major sources of emissions. Under REACH, we have several restrictions on lead in jewelry, in consumer articles, as a stabilizer in PVC articles. And then maybe the most important restriction, which is closely linked to the one we are discussing today, is the lead gunshot in wetlands, which entered into application on 16th of February in 2023. One interesting point is that the UK, they have left the EU, but they are also proceeding with a ban on lead in ammunition. And the legislation that they have approved is very similar to the one that the Commission has proposed. The first point I would like to make is that the restriction that we proposed is based on a scientific dossier that was prepared by the European Chemicals Agency and that was assessed by an independent committee and two independent committees of the European Chemical Agencies. And so they prepared an opinion, and we base our proposal on the opinion, even if we don't follow 100%. We made some changes. So the two main reasons why we are progressing with the restriction is because we found a risk. We found a risk both for the human health and for the environment. The main concern for human health is neurodevelopmental effects on children from the consumption of game meat that leads to IQ loss. And then we have seen, and this has been showed in several studies that have been assessed by ECHA, that when you have meat from a game that has been hunted with lead ammunition, there are particles of lead that still stay in the meat, even if you try to cut off the part around the wound. So this is not sufficient to remove all lead. And an important thing to notice is that for the human health effects of lead, toxicologists, they have not been able to set a safe threshold. So there is not a safe limit for exposure to lead. If we go to the environment, here the main concern are lethal and sublethal effects on birds from the ingestion of lead. So you can have mortality of birds by direct ingestion of lead shot, but also by a secondary ingestion because of lead shot and bullets that are present in contaminated viscera, for example, or in carrion that can be eaten by scavenger birds. And then you have also sublethal effects that increase the likelihood of mortality from predation of the birds. Now, moving to the explanation of the restriction, I will try to be as simple as possible. Many of you maybe have already read the text. It's not so easy to understand because it is a complicated structure and also because of the terminology. So in case you don't understand something, of course, you will be able to ask questions at the end. So what we are covering in this restriction are two types of ammunition, the shots and the bullets. And we cover them when they contain 1% of lead or more. So I first present the general approach of the restriction, and then I will go into the details of the different provisions. So we have the use of shots and bullets, and we have the potential emissions of lead. So where we have high emissions of lead that cannot be prevented, then we propose a ban with transitional period to give the time to adapt to the legislation. This is, for example, the case of gunshot use for hunting. When there are no or low emissions, we propose permanent derogations in the restriction, and this is the case for shooting with bullets. When the emissions are there, but they can be prevented without having a ban, then we propose derogations, but with additional conditions. For example, risk management measures to reduce the emissions of lead. And this is the case for shooting with gunshot. For some of the derogations, we have a review period of 10 years, so that we can see that if the situation has changed, this can be modified. And horizontally, we apply information and labeling requirements for the sale of lead. A key point is that all military and security uses are out of scope, so they are not considered in the restriction. So I will start first with gunshot, and then I will move to bullets. So we have two main uses of gunshots, for hunting and for sport shooting. And the prohibition in the REACH restrictions are either on the use or on the sale. We call the sale placing on the market, or on both. So I will now explain for each of the uses what we propose. For hunting with shot, we propose a prohibition on the use, and we restrict both the discharge of the gunshot and also the carry of the gunshots to go hunting. We propose a transitional period of 3 years so that hunters can adapt. And then we have one generic derogation from this prohibition, which is for historic firearms. Moving to sport shooting with gunshot, the prohibition on the use is with a longer transitional period because more time is needed, is considered to be needed in this case, 5 years. And then, very important, we have a conditional derogation that we propose, and I will explain this later. Then we have the prohibition on the sale, the placing on the market, which applies to both uses. And here we have the longest of the two transitional periods, which is 5 years. And also for the placing on the market, for the sport shooting with gunshot, we have this conditional derogation that I will explain later. And also for placing on the market, the derogation for historic firearms applies. Now moving to sport shooting. This derogation on placing on the market and on the use is time unlimited. It was initially proposed to expire after 15 years, but then we changed this and we removed this transitional period. So this applies to sport shooting ranges with gunshots that have implemented risk management measures, and I will explain later what we mean by risk management measures, after 5 years. So these sport shooting that have implemented these risk management measures, they can continue to use lead gunshot, but only a certain shot size, which is the size that is normally used for sport shooting, limited to members of sport shooting federation. And then there are some requirements for the member states that they need to make available a list of these shooting ranges that have applied the risk management measures. These, of course, after the 5 years transitional period. And then they need to keep records on the quantity of lead that has been discharged or recovered. Now, I will not go into the details of all these risk management measures that are foreseen for the shooting ranges to be able to use this derogation, but we have a specific lead containment measures like walls, berms, surface coverage, and the shooting ranges, they need to implement at least 2 of these risk management measures that are in a list which is in appendix to the restriction. And then we have the requirements to recover the spent lead every 5 years, and then when there is a cessation of activity, to control the pH on the surface, containment and treatment of drainage water, and then also agricultural uses cannot happen on shooting ranges. Now moving to bullets, Also, in this case, we have different requirements for hunting and for sport shooting. For bullets, we don't have a prohibition on the sale, on the placing on the market. And the reason for this is that we have a very large exemptions from the ban on the use, so it is not practicable to have a prohibition on the placing on the market. So the prohibition is only on the use. For hunting, we have different transitional periods depending on the size, on the calibers of the bullets. So for the largest ones, the transitional period is relatively short, is 1.5 years. But for the smallest one is 10 years, and also for rimfire bullets is 10 years. This is due to the fact that the alternatives for these two last applications are currently not available, so more time is needed to develop them. On sport shooting, we have, with bullets, we have a prohibition on the use with the transitional period of 5 years as well. But here we have a general derogation for outdoor shooting ranges. So if the shooting with bullets happen in a shooting range, there is no ban, there is no prohibition, it can continue. And in this case, differently from the case of the gunshot, we have no risk management measures that need to be implemented by these shooting ranges. So now a bit more of details on the derogations. For hunting with bullets, we have derogations from the ban on use. For some specific type of hunting, the one for seal hunting, where it is permitted in the member states that allow this, and then also for full metal jacket bullets because of the lack of alternatives and because there is no risk. On the sport shooting, as I have already said, there is a complete derogation for outdoor sport shooting ranges, and there is a review after 10 years. To see if there have been changes and something needs to be changed in the restriction. And we also fully exempt traditional events and fun fairs. We have then some generic derogations from ban on use that apply both to hunting and to sport shooting. And this is mostly for historical firearms, where indeed it would be difficult to use a different material than lead, and also for some bullets that are made with copper and copper alloys and might contain a certain amount of lead, which is above the 1%. So we exempt until a content of lead to 3%. So in addition to the restriction and the different bans, we have information requirements. Also in this case, I will not read everything, but these apply to the retailers of gunshots and bullets, and it's mostly to inform those that are purchasing the material of the danger of lead. And this needs to be put in place 6 months after the entry into force of the restriction. And we have labeling requirements for the packaging of gunshot and bullets. And also in this case, it is a warning on the hazard of lead, and the transitional period is 18 months. Autoscope, so what we exclude completely from the restriction. Indoor shooting is excluded, so all that I have explained to you applies to outdoor shooting. Then we exclude all the uses by police and law enforcement, and the military and defense, as I said at the beginning. And all the rest, I will not go into the detail, but all this is in the text of the restriction. Now, I will move now to the 2 main concerns and criticisms that have been raised during these months after we published the restriction proposal. The first one concerns the defense preparedness. So is there going to be an impact on defense preparedness? So we thought a lot about this, and this was one of the reasons why it took so long to the Commission to come forward with a proposal. And we tried to draft this restriction in a way to avoid such an impact. So military and security uses are outside of the scope. And then, as I explained, we have a permanent derogation without conditions for the use of lead bullets in shooting ranges. This means that these shooting ranges, they will not have to invest to implement risk management measures. they will not decrease in number, and then it will be possible for reservists and civilians to train there, because this was one concern raised by several member states. We also believe that since lead bullets in shooting ranges will still continue to be allowed, there is no ban on these, the demand for lead bullets will remain high, or it will even increase, and I will go more into the detail on this later. And then the production lines, they should be impacted. They should not be impacted. The second criticism was the impact on the ammunition industry. What we think is that with the proposal that we have put on the table, the impacts are expected to be limited and affordable by the industry. If we look at gunshot, we already have the restriction on gunshots in wetlands. This means that the transition towards an alternative, still gunshots, has already started, and some investments have already been made. If we look at bullets, the demand from lead bullets is mostly linked to sport shooting, and sport shooting with bullets is completely exempted. If you look at the tonnages as they were estimated by ECA in 2022, so maybe now they are no longer up to date, but the volume of bullets used for sport shooting is much higher than the volume used for hunting. So at the time, ECA estimated 44,000 tons per year, and for sport shooting, while for hunting, we had 134 tons per year. And the part that is restricted, banned, is only the 134 tons, so it's 0.3%. So for this reason, we believe that the demand for lead bullets will stay the same, even with the restriction. On the other side, the demand for military bullets is expected to increase because of the geopolitical situation. Already in 2022, in a different situation, SEA concluded that the restriction was proportionate, and now the situation is even more favorable to industry. And this is why we think that the impacts, if they are there, they are probably affordable. I'm finished. So the next steps, we are discussing the restriction in the REACH committee. Next meeting is in December, but we will continue the discussion also next year. If the REACH committee votes positively on the restriction, then the restriction will reach the European Parliament and the Council for a scrutiny. And if there is no objection by the European Council, by the Council and the European Parliament, the Commission will be able to adopt the restriction. That's it. Thank you. And sorry if I was about time.
Thank you very much. Now it's everything okay. We need to know that this place is open for us until 1900. It has to be finished before. If we want a discussion, we need to be swift. But with that, I am pleased to invite Dr. Ruth Krumi to take the floor. She, as I said, is an expert who worked extensively on this file within the European Chemical Agency. 10 minutes, floor is yours.
Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. Yes, I'm Ruth Cromie. I'm a scientist, but I've worked a lot at the science policy interface, dealing mainly with One Health issues. But I think it's worth saying I'm a very practical person, and I've been very interested in the human dimension of this lead poisoning issue, which I've dealt with for a long time. I'm not going to give a very technical presentation, but I'm going to talk about the benefits of this restriction, which I think is a narrative that is sometimes missing from the discussion and the dialogue that is out there. So, as we all know then, use of lead, highly regulated for almost all purposes, and ammunition then really sits on the outside of that. But of course, we have a history of resistance to health protection when we're trying to remove lead from our lives. But I'm really hoping that although the tetraethyl lead in petrol took many decades, I'm really hoping that collectively we can be on the right side of history for this particular restriction. And I think in any of the discussions we are having about the problem we're trying to solve, I think we have to always remember that we're dealing with this highly toxic substance of lead. We have got a problem that we're trying to solve, and it requires a non-toxic solution. So as Valentina said, we're dealing with a substance that has no safe level of lead exposure. So we really have to work collectively then to find responses to that. So what benefits would we see? Of course, there is the restriction that would, it would benefit wildlife. And because this is a poison that creates high mortality, but also affects births, then possibly for some populations, we will even see a bounce back, from a hunting perspective. I imagine there'll probably be, more birds to shoot for some of those populations, but it will certainly benefit wildlife. I think it's worth understanding that this will benefit livestock as well. And we see fewer of these reports, but they are definitely in the literature. And certainly in my time, a lot of these don't actually then actually get into the scientific literature. But livestock like poultry and cattle particularly will be picking up pieces of lead shot, particularly when they are next to sports shooting facilities where the shot may be blown onto the ground. So there are poultry cases, for example, and they're herd of calf suckling cows then grazing on this area with a private biathlon range, then suffering from clinical chronic lead poisoning. And there, just as an example, there's a man who had bought some land next to a clay shooting ground to raise. He put 500 domestic ducks on there. But what ducks do is they will seek out these pellets. And then, unfortunately, his business completely failed because, of course, he lost so many birds then to lead poisoning. New research, more research coming out on this. This restriction then would protect pets and hunting dogs. So we know that dogs in hunting households that may be fed the offcuts, they're being exposed to very high levels of lead. And we even know that when we're testing pet foods, we find very high levels, much higher levels of lead in pet foods than you even would do in game meat for human consumption, which we think then is probably because of this fragmentation, this grinding up of the lead ammunition, which then goes into the dog food, and then the dogs are eating that. So fairly recent research, but it is not surprising then to find these high levels of lead. As Valentina has already outlined, it's the protection of human health, which I think is such an important aspect of this restriction. And there is a great quote there from two authors then who had written a paper on a man actually with clinical lead poisoning, quite unusual, but he'd eaten so much game. But their comment in that scientific paper was supersonic injection of toxin-leaching frangible projectiles into food is intuitively bad. And of course, that's unfortunately what lead does. It micronizes, it fragments, so it spreads throughout the meat. So even if you are cutting out a lot of damaged meat from the wound channel, you are still being exposed to these small particles of lead, which are then easier to absorb in the gut. And the greatest risk there are those frequent consumers, pregnant women and children. So really in hunting families, you can see they're at greatest risk. And it is these neurodevelopmental impacts which are particularly important for children. So ECHA in their analysis then estimated about 7,000 children per year actually suffering IQ loss as a consequence of this exposure to lead. And for adults, then you can expect other symptoms, whether that is lethargy, but it's particularly associated with chronic kidney disease, increased blood pressure, etc. I have to say, in working on this issue for 25 years or something, I've lost count of the number of people who have said to me, I've been eating it all my life and it's never done me any harm. And I always think, well, it's never done you any good, and it might be difficult to disentangle your blood pressure problems from other aspects of your lifestyle. This restriction would prevent costly food safety incidents. So there's a couple of examples there of having to do supermarket recalls of eggs because of poultry had been eating lead shot. And then just recently then the Czech Republic was removal from the shelves then of what was called hunter's sausage because of high levels of lead being found in it. Although you may be aware there's no EU maximum level of lead for game meat as it stands. But I think this restriction would bring a real market for safe game meat. And I point out there my colleague, John Gregson, on the right-hand side of that picture. So a lifelong hunter, used to edit Shooting magazine in the UK, but he was working at Waitrose, part of the John Lewis partnership, and this supermarket chain, they're the largest game retailers in the UK. And he really wanted to promote safe game meat through their supermarkets. Well, unfortunately, so he tried, but his suppliers let him down, and he describes then what was a reputational and food safety nightmare ensued, where he had campaigners outside Waitrose shops when they had tried to do the right thing. So I think if we are really trying to promote safe game meat, then really, if you are doing this whilst it's shot with lead, you know, then the messaging really doesn't work. It's not safe at all. And here, the restriction would protect the health of shooters. So there's lots of information and scientific publications on blood lead levels from people shooting in indoor settings and a few from outdoor settings. But of course, what we see then is those shooters inhaling or ingesting particles of lead from actually just that dust and the particles that are around them. And we have this sort of problem of the take-home lead on clothing then. And we see then in the States, there a study, for example, of pediatric exposures following firearm use. And of course, the restriction would protect soils, crops, and the wider environment, because all that lead that's going out, particularly with the lead shot in shooting ranges there, this will eventually be degrading and going into soils. And if these are being used then for agriculture, then we're talking about contaminated land. And two other quick ones there. I think if we were able to change the rules for sports shooting, this would absolutely save money then for those shooting ranges, so they wouldn't have to pay those cleanup costs. You know, the polluter would not be paying because they would not be polluting. It would be absolutely stopping the problem at source. And I think also it would provide the blessing of time and resources for dealing with other issues. And I'm reminded of an event I was at, which had a hunting stakeholder there saying to the policy people, can you please just impose this restriction on us to sort of take it off our shoulders? I think because it has been difficult in many settings to get leadership on this. So it was an interesting perspective, and it would free up then lots of time for dealing with other issues. The restriction would also create guaranteed markets for non-toxic ammunition in Europe, but also further afield. So I was in a meeting last week where Southern African colleagues were saying, we've got all the demand, we just don't have the supply. So I think it's about understanding that there are markets out there for non-toxic ammunition. And if we look then, who is actually supporting this restriction? So we see there's all the receptors. We've got this kind of omni problem, if you like. Then who is supportive? Well, it's the medical community, the vets, the scientists, the conservationists, but the food retailers, wider society. People don't like poisoning. It's terrible to have this hunting and poisoning sort of put together. The progressive hunters are supportive, the progressive shooters, and the hunting leaders. And I think this is important. There from a previous statement, you know, we urge you not to succumb to suggestions that it's not possible to change. It is. And in the bottom right-hand corner there, the young, the future hunters, the people that you would want to be bringing into to hunting, who will not want to be using lead. Of course, if we look to Denmark, they have banned all their lead shot in 1996, and they banned their lead centerfire bullets just last year. And of course, you know, what Niels and others would say is that nothing undermines the argument that it can't be done, showing that actually it can be done. The photograph there of the guys with their hands in the air is hunters being asked, are you using non-lead bullets, before the ban came in? So they were really ahead of the game. They were already using non-lead bullets. And then, of course, as has been mentioned, following Brexit, you know, we had this parallel GB process, and because we're just dealing with one country, then we have moved ahead of the EU in the UK. And in the summer, then the minister announced that we would indeed be banning lead ammunition. But importantly there, and I asked the UK government people on a number of occasions, you know, how did the Ministry of Defence respond to this? And they had raised no concerns over this. And interestingly, the minister there went for tighter timelines to, quote, and this was said repeatedly, to reap the benefits sooner. So I'm glad to say the shooting industry is pivoting to support this. You see this in the shooting media. And of course, now I would say there's a market advantage both on the game meat, but on the non-toxic ammunition. So to finish up, I think that there are multiple benefits here and across multiple sectors. And it's worth understanding there will be more damaging evidence from the medical, from the veterinary, environmental communities, greater public awareness of this as a poisoning issue, more reputational, I don't know, even litigation risks, more R&D of those non-toxic alternatives, greater shared experience and greater consumer demand as shooters get used to those alternatives, and those economic incentives of those markets and trade in game meat. So I would say that now others are already ahead of the EU, and I would suggest from working with hunters so much over years that delaying this restriction is not necessarily serving hunting and shooting well. And I think that if we can really understand this toxic problem that we're trying to grapple with, so I think if there is a will, then I think we will find a way then to do this restriction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would invite, I would invite Mr. Terry Jacobs to take the floor. He's the president of Association of European Manufacturing of Sporting Ammunition, representing over 65 members across Europe and EEA countries. So floor is yours, 10 minutes.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Terras. Thank you for hosting us. So I am the president of AFEMS. So this is an association of 65 members producing not only military and civilian ammunition, but also all the value chain of the production, meaning that as members, we have also people producing ammunition, people producing raw material, people manufacturing, machining to make munition, people making components, and so on. So we cover all the value chain of the production. And important to say that with our members, we cover between 90 and 95% of the production of civil and military small arms ammunition in EU. So what we do, of course, provide a platform for cooperation, exchange of information, and also advocate for the small caliber ammunition industry at European level. And it's important. It's important for the industry to be listened, but above all, it's important to be heard and understood. I don't want to go back because this slide and the next one has been perfectly and clearly explained by Mrs. Bertado. I want to go directly to the main concern we have. We have a huge concern regarding defense. Why? Because since the beginning, we say there is a strong independence in the production of civil and military ammunition. And who better than the industry can explain this? Who better than the industry can understand this link? Who better than the industry can explain the why of this interdependence? And who better than the industry can explain the risk for the defense industry, but also for the civilian industry with the current proposal? Something important to know that today, civil market is about 60–65% of the total ammunition market, maybe much closer now than 60 due to the Ukraine crisis. Military, so it's about 40, and law enforcement. But something important, both segments use exactly identical technology, same type of machinery, same raw material, and most of the military manufacturers of ammunition in Europe produce also civil ammunition. So it's a mix in our members. We just have one company who just produce military, we produce civilian small arms ammunition. So that's why the supply chain is clearly deeply interconnected between what we do for the civilian ammunition and what we do for the military ammunition. So despite the exemption for the military use, the restriction on the civilian use will certainly have huge consequences for small calibers. So when we say small caliber, it's less than 0.50 production. And also because this interconnection, civil ammunition production is vital for the military ammunition production. So what are the risks? I will explain the defense concern. Today, the top priority of the company is to increase the military production capacity to achieve the strategic autonomy and be aligned with a REARM program that has been decided at EU level. As most of the civilian ammunition manufacturers are also involved in the military and law enforcement production, all the resource, financial resource, but also human resource and know-how to develop alternative solutions will be therefore to be redirected to the creation of lead-free ammunition. What does it mean? We will do anything more to increase the autonomy for military ammunition production because it's the same resource. We cannot do both together. It's impossible. So also, because 95% of the civil ammunition contain leads, if we restrict the use and the placement, we will purely jeopardize the supply chain of leads. That the same that we use for military one. This is just a graph that shows that with the gunshot restriction for hunting, we lose 25% of the supply of lead, meaning that a lot of the suppliers, and there are not so many suppliers of lead, but they will go into bankruptcy. They are at high risk. But this is the same one we use to develop the rest of the production. And if we lose, because we don't know yet regarding the risk management measure, what will happen with the use of gunshot of sport shooting, the risk of losing between 25 and 40% is very important and it's crucial for the rest of the supply chain. By the way, also, because we heard something that, okay, we save the use of bullets on outdoor shooting range. You see, what does it mean? 2.7%. I'm sorry to say that to the hunter, but I'm afraid that only a few companies will spend money to develop something for a small market like this when they need to work on the rest of the market and especially on the increase of the military production. So what are the key challenges to replace lead in ammunition? First of all, we need to find a substitution material. We heard a lot of things, but there are a lot of key properties that must be followed by this substitution material. Of course, the density. Okay, lead is perfect until no. That's why we use lead since almost more than 300 years, because it fulfills all the requirements. We need to have also strategic autonomy, meaning that if you are heard, tungsten, 80% is coming from China. And the third producer of tungsten is Russia. I don't believe they will be happy to deliver us this kind of material to produce ammunition. Same thing with bismuth, 83% is coming from China. The price, but this is something else, and of course the production cost, because lead, due to its ductility, is easy to manufacture. We just press lead inside the mold to make ammunition. If we need to use steel or something else, it means that we need to make a machining of a barrel. So it will be much more expensive. And today, we are not able to use only 15% of what we use to produce bullet ammunition product could be used for non-lead bullets, sorry. So there is high cost for adaptation. So if we need to produce a new material, lead-free ammunition, first of all, we need to find which one, and we will see. Yes, it will be very challenging. Why? Because most of the people forget that ammunition is a part of a system. It's a firearms and ammunition system with a lot of requirements for safety. No. And don't forget that in ammunition, you have very high pressure, very high temperature, high velocity. So you cannot change like this. I will give you an example. For example, we have a program with European Defence Agency. We have a program where we find almost all the European companies producing military ammunition to develop a new kind of ammunition without lead. So it means that we are not opposed about the lead ban, but we say we need time. Just for this military program, we have 4 years to define the materials, and that we need to define and we are free to define which kind of firearm we want to use. We are free to define the caliber with this new material. But if we develop a lead-free ammunition for civilian ammunition, we need to keep in mind that we have more than 300 different caliber. And for each one, we need to be sure that the safety condition will remain the same, that will be also approved by CIP. And for the military, it must be also approved by NATO. And the standardization process for NATO is at least 10 years. So what we need, two main things. We need at least 10 years. Once again, I repeat, industry and not again. But the timing that is given is totally unrealistic for us. It's impossible, not only due to the Ukrainian crisis, but also due to technical parameters. And also, please give us a global approach, having the same transition period for every product. It will be much more easy for everyone inside. So this thing, regarding timing has been recognized. I don't want to read, but if you read in the final document of ECA opinion, we recognize that 18 months is not feasible. So I just want to go maybe also two different things. There are also a lot of other concern. We are not the only one that have a lot of questions regarding this lead. For example, when I had the discussion a couple of weeks ago with law enforcement, they're afraid of the effect of a lead-free ammunition about what's happening behind bloody armor trauma effect. Will it increase? Yes, certainly. What about the shooting range? And it will be certainly repaid by Mr. Rossi, but we have a lot of questions about the shooting range if we have not enough shooting range still alive because we are working with gunshot and bullets ammunition. And the question is, law enforcement, most of them in some countries use the same shooting range as the civilian shooters. And this shooter, if they disappear because they are not able, what about law enforcement? So once again, as conclusion, I will say that we are not again, but we need to fulfill the strategic gap. If we are not fulfilling the strategic gap as we have described, we go directly in a wall, not only for civilian, but also for defense. And this is what I'm afraid of. Thanks a lot. And of course, industry is open for discussion and to explain all what has been said today. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you very much. I don't know how it happened that the ladies on my left and the men on my right have so opposing positions. I would say that's human life, isn't it? But we try to find the common grounds here for sure. As a last speaker, but not least, of course, I'm pleased to invite Mr. Luciano Rossi, an old friend of mine, to take the floor as a president of International Shooting Sports Federation, the governing body of the Olympic shooting competitions and several non-Olympic shooting disciplines also. Floor is yours, Luciano.
Thank you, Rio. Thank you for your invitation and congratulations for your passion, our passion. Who we are. Founded in 1907, the International Shooting Sport Federation is the governing body of the Olympic shooting competition and regulate several non-Olympic shooting sports. We recognize still now 163 national federation, all under the rules of the National Olympic Committee in all the continent. So you can understand it's our global dimension, also under the regia, the international regia of our International Olympic Committee. The federation activity include the regulation of sport, managing Olympic qualification events and quota plays, organization of tournament like the World Cup, the World Championship, and ensuring that International Shooting Sports Federation serve as a model of good governance and sustainability in sport. ISSF is determined to use all technological innovation to engage with the new audience, especially the young, and to introduce them to the shooting sport in an engaging way. Impact of Riho approach, our athletes follow unveiled international rules that cannot be quickly changed. Regional regulations like those in Europe affecting ammunition may impact competition and European athletes. The SSF evaluates both environment protection and sport integrity, supporting responsibility-led management. Balanced, evidence-based policies and essential. Phasing out lead ammunition in Europe call for athletes to train with different material that use international, leading to global competitive disadvantage. Restriction in outdoor ranges might also limit training opportunity with lead ammunition affecting athletes' readiness. The European Commission has recognized this use and suggests certain exceptions that permit ongoing use under definite circumstances. Nevertheless, the technical requirements outline the risk management measures of the current proposal are challenging to most facilities to meet even those this already handle lead responsibility. This is especially thought for small local ranges, which may not have the necessary research to implement major upgrades quickly. Consequently, the environmental risk will not be solved, since shooting ranges will be abandoned and so continue to pose a risk. Also, Europe has around, maybe more, 4,000 clay shooting ranges. There is not complete information on how many have adopted the recommendation risk management measures. This lack of data makes it difficult to accurately evaluate the socio-economic consequence of this restriction. More precise and practical guidance could help achieve environmental objectives without placing undue burden on sport and local community. Some of the proposed of the risk management measurement are complex and hard for range owners to implement. Even ranges practicing responsibility lead management may struggle with the current derogation requirements. A case-by-case approach would be better address the variety of ranges, type, and condition. The 5-year compliance period is likely too short for planning, founding, and completing the needed work. The International Shooting Sports Federation fully supports Europe's dedication to protecting the environment, aligning with the principles of the International Olympic Committee, IOC. However, it is crucial that any future measurements are practical, reasonable, and supported by solid evidence. One key question is how many of Europe's 4,000 ranges will be able to meet the suggestion exemption requirement. A balanced approach is needed to ensure both environmental protection and the ongoing viability of sporting activity. The risk management requirements should be updated for greater flexibility and site-specific solution, as many ranges already manage lead effectively. So now, SSF especially recommend extending the compliance period for flexible adaptation, allowing the lead recovery based on range design, use, maintenance, and economic viability rather than set intervals, letting member states approve environment conditions tailored to each ranges if protection standards are met. Without this change, most clay ranges in Europe may close, forcing athletes abroad for training and reducing Europe's competitiveness. The European shooting sport community is strongly dedicated to sustainability and responsible action. Any future regulations should be practical, fair, and grounded in evidence. Otherwise, there is a risk for harming not only top-level competition, but also affecting thousands of local clubs and community from the grassroots of our sport. ISSF urges an approach that strikes a balance between protecting the environment and preserving the future of shooting sport in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Luciano. Thank you for the speakers. I have here 2 pages of questions myself, but I will avoid that. The only thing which I want to emphasize as a general in reserve, but also as a soldier, that whatever we do in the times of war, we should not harm the production of military means and the training of the soldiers. And as I see at the current regulation, that the current timings are really very dangerous for that purpose, as was already explained here. I will take 3 questions at once and then give the people possibility to respond. Please introduce yourself and be very short and precise. Please.
I go first, okay. My name is Thomas Weitz. I'm a member of European Parliament since 8 years. I'm an Austrian organic farmer, landowner, forester, and so on and so forth. A few points. I was a bit astonished, especially by the business representative. I mean, your sector is having the once-in-a-lifetime business in the moment. I understand that you say it's a bit difficult to change production means in these times of high requirements. This is the argument I understand. But on the other side, I mean, there's, I would say from the business case side, I think it's a very favorable situation for the companies and the whole sector in the moment. And unfortunately, this is the circumstances we're in. I'm not happy about it, but we need to invest into our defense capabilities. This is very clear. I mean, to mix up, to announce here that lead industry might go bankrupt because we changed the legislation on hunters' ammunition is a bit brave, because the requests and the demand for lead-based ammunition is as high as it never was in the history of European Union. So I really find it a bit astonishing how you pull arguments out of the bag, which are, which I mean, you won't stand a discussion with me on several of your arguments. I think it's not needed. It's not needed to pull out these arguments that are not really based on facts. But there's something totally different I want to actually say to the hunters community. Look, hunting is an integral part of also forestry. It's important that there's hunting. It is for me also, you know, I prefer to eat game than to eat meat from agro-industry. And I do agricultural policy since 25 years. I know what I'm talking about. But then, I mean, if you want to invest into the quality, into the marketing of game meat, then it's the best thing you can do to get away from lead. Because that's not going to fly with our markets. That's not going to fly with consumers. And you know that hunting is already quite under pressure when it comes to public opinion. Use that opportunity to get out of the lead, to get away from lead, because it is a health, it has a health impact. It has a negative impact on the environment. People understand that. And when it's about health of hunters family, of people that live in rural areas, isn't that in the core of your concerns? So I seriously don't understand why there's still resistance to change to lead-free ammunition. I know on some calibers it's not there yet. I understand that there will be some time, and there is some time needed for transition periods. But look, I mean, just because we're doing it since 300 years, that's not an argument for me to keep on doing it. You have the technology, you have the knowledge, you know how to do it. It's on the market, not all the calibers, not all the uses, I know, but you know, that's progress. And if you want to get a positive sentiment of society, and I'm a green politician, but I'm a farmer at the same time. If you want to have a positive response from society, then go with the modern developments and don't try to still, tone down that legislation. We're talking about lead-free ammunition
Mr.
since
Weiss?
20 years. 20 years. Yeah. And now you're still saying, oh my God, it's now all coming and we need more time, more time, more time. And sorry, sports are out of the legislation. Defense is out of the legislation. I think it's a very reasonable proposal, and I'm very supportive, and I will be happily taking part into the discussion here in Parliament.
My name is Christer Holmgren from Sweden, Swedish Forum. I have been involved in this question for many, many, many years. And my first question is how to ban a thing who is an element. Lead is an element. Lead metal is not poison by itself, it's only the compounds. And the risk for the environment, where we have in Sweden approximately 24 ppm of lead in the ground. It means about 235 kilograms per hectare in the first meter of the gravel. So it's very interesting. Next thing is how to measuring the problem. I'm an old man, real old, living with gasoline from lead. And I think a lot of people here is also old enough to have lived in the towns. And it means, depending on the discussion, that the EQ on all these people will be very, very low. Because now it's risky for just lead from hunting ammunition. What is the impact on population level of just game meat? It's very, very small, of course. It's nothing. My blood lead level is 37 micrograms per liter. And believe me, what is that? In Europe, went down. Then the gasoline lead was taken away. It was right down there with the blood lead level. So what is interesting, measuring the blood lead level will tell how is the exposure from lead, where it's coming from. It's not coming from the ammunition, it's impossible. And lead in water, I never heard about that metal lead is water, it's toxic for water living things, but copper is. So I stop there. I have another person.
Thank you. There.
Thank you very much. My name is Peter Brass. I am the General Secretary of AECAC, which is the European Association for the Civil Commerce of Weapons. Our members are retailers and gun shops. Most of them are very, very small, family owned by ages. And I have two questions. The first goes to Ms. Bertado, to the Commission. We do need much more transition periods because these small enterprises, they buy way upfront and invest sums in guns and ammunition. And what do you think should happen after the transition period if these small enterprises get stuck with a huge pile of ammunition or anything? Can they be? Do you have to have any program, any compensation program for these small enterprises? And the other question goes to Mrs. Kromek. You've mentioned that Denmark went out of lead for many, many years. Are you aware that not every EU member state is a member of the CIP? We are related to certain proof laws in the EU, which means countries, they are within the CIP, and we are not able to use unrestricted lead ammunition in any gun. So that will mean that's a big effect on the value of guns and rifles, and they cannot be used in the future anymore. Denmark is not in the CIP, so they don't care, but we have to rely on these laws. And what are we going to do when we change? So from the retailer point of view, we do need much more transition periods if we want to fulfill that requirement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I take one more here in the first row. Yeah.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Aki Suvilahti. I'm CEO of Norma Precision Sweden. So we are a small caliber manufacturer focusing on 5.56 to 12.7 millimeter. 50% of our business is coming from hunting, 50% coming from military at the moment. I've been personally part of developing lead-free ammunition, also industrializing one, and I think I'm pretty well on top of things, how actually the manufacturing is happening. The product that we've been dealing with is one of the leading lead-free ammunition in the market. Basically, production capability of our machines are 2 pieces per minute for such a bullet. With conventional manufacturing, capacity is 120 pieces per minute. So we are talking about 60 times difference with productivity. In addition to this, floor space, I mean footprint of this kind of lead-free machining unit is 2 times more than conventional press. We are currently in position that we are going to transfer 2 of our old production lines, I mean lines that are capable of making defense bullets, to make room for capacity of only 2 million pieces per year for lead-free ammunition. So this would basically mean that it has huge impact to the defense preparedness, at least from our perspective, our manufacturing site in Sweden. To have 2 million pieces of lead-free ammunition production, we would replace tens of millions of lead core bullet production. And with those machines, we can make defense products. This is just something that my question is generally, have we done enough work to discover, is it really affecting the defense preparedness altogether? Thank you.
I think they will. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. David Scallon, Secretary General of FACE, European Federation for Hunting and Conservation. My question is for the European Commission, and it's about time. And I make this point on behalf of all our members, 37 national hunting associations in 37 European countries. 3 years for lead shot, in our view, is too short. We produced a large study on this, 18,000 hunters replied, and it clearly showed we need more time. 18 months for center fire, and particularly the small center fire, is too short. We're really concerned about sufficient scale. And also, why not introduce a review clause for rimfire? ECHA has already shown that the non-lead rimfire is not up to scratch as the lead rimfire. So why not add that review clause or even a permanent derogation? So thank you.
So I think now, since we have 10 minutes left, I will give the floor to respond to the questions, and then after that, if we still have some time, then I can't unfortunately take all the questions, but I am sure we are happy to receive them electronically in 3 examples, and we will pass them to the Commission if necessary. So I will give the floor here to my left, because the right side is content with.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think there were a lot of questions, real questions on the proposal, but there was one on the stocks, what to do with the stocks for the smaller retailers. this is indeed something that we can consider if we can give more time to get rid of the stocks. The point is, if you have longer transitional periods, let's say instead of 3 years, we have 5, wouldn't it be the same for the retailers that at the end they find themselves at the end of the 3 or the 5 years with stock that they cannot place on the market? I think the solution there is really the communication once the restriction is there and the deadlines are clear, to try to reach all the smaller retailers as well. But indeed, the question of stock, we will keep this in mind. And then on the production, the manufacture of the ammunitions, when you were talking about the different speed of production for the lead-free compared to the lead ones, you're talking about bullets, but bullets for hunting, because the bullets for shooting and for defense, all that will not need to move to lead-free. All that is going to be out. So this is the difficulty I have sometimes in listening also to Mr. Jacobs, that is talking about ammunition in general. But I tried in my presentation to be clear that we have different provisions for gunshot and for bullets. And bullets for hunting are covered, but all the other types of bullets are out. So it is difficult for me to understand really the reasoning behind this impact on something that we are not covering. And then the comment by Face, indeed we know that this is a critical point for hunting, for the small calibers, and it is a possibility that we will be considering to have a review period. Up to now, we have in the restriction the transitional period that had been proposed by ECA. But you know, when we progress with the discussion in the REACH committee, we know that these transitional periods will also come under discussion, and we will see how we can manage to find a balance. But indeed, a review period, in case to check if the alternatives are there, if the production is sufficient, at the end of the transitional period could be a solution that we have used also in other cases, like a kind of safety clause to be sure that indeed there will be availability of ammunition or bullets for hunting after the end of the transitional period. Thank you.
Thank you. I was asked specifically about CIP, which I'm no great expert in, so that's not very helpful, except I do know that whenever I've spoken to any of my hunting colleagues, they feel this is almost an artificial barrier that's being put in place because it could be resolved, and this is now where I can't give you the exact details, but there will be others in the room who know, though, how that can be overcome. So I think it is a barrier, and I will go back to my original point of this is a situation that we have to address. We're talking about sustainability of hunting and so on. So where there is a will, we have to find a way, and I'm sure that we can do that. Certainly the hunting colleagues I've spoken to feel that that is entirely solvable.
Yes, just want to comment because it's true what you say, but we make a difference, of course, between bullets and gunshot. But the supply chain is the same. The producers are the same. The people who develop R&D and so on are the same. And this is what we have as concern. And I understand what you say. We need time to do that. We just need time. As you clearly explained, it's not so easy to develop lead-free ammunition, taking into account CIP, taking into account a lot of concern for safety. Once again, we are not again, we just need time.
We follow this. You know what happened? We cannot forget that Europe must do the best in this matter, but the time is important. And please, we talk about 1,000 club story, and also the best athletes preparation for the next Olympic that will be held in United States and the next in Australia. So we cannot pay the bill, the European athletes that cannot training, compete in the same level. So I repeat, we follow, we are completely support this action, but time, respect, and collect more information and share more information because we can receive some good idea.
Thank you. My name is Axel Singhofen. I'm working for the Greens EFA in the European Parliament. I have two questions. One with regard to defense. the fact that the Commission was working, or that a ban was being prepared, is known since 2019 when the Commission made the request. There was a public consultation. There was zero comment, from what I understand, with regard to defense. How come that the defense industry is only waking up now? My second question is with regard to sports shooting. I mean, sports are there, in my understanding, for fun, right? It's a sport. It's to make pleasure. It's not to pollute the environment. Now you are getting possibly a derogation, but you're still saying we cannot meet the risk management measures. I would like to read the list, because it's very short, of the 4.
Sorry, short question, because
Yes.
you'll take all the time now. Do it short, please.
There are 4 things of which you have to choose 2. 1 or more walls, 1 or more berms or banks made of soil, 1 or more nets or shot curtains or surface covering. And you're telling me you can't do any of those 2?
Thank you. And there was a lady. I want to be balanced.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is seems like a fairly balanced on stage, but the audience could have a bit more of both sides of the story. My question is, as we've heard, that we have had time as society, you have had time as industry and as sports to do the transition. The transition has been minimal. Wouldn't a little bit of help get you to where you need to be? Wouldn't some legal signal make industry actually follow? Because every time there's been some change, there's been the concerns, we cannot do it, this is terrible, we will be all bankrupt, society will collapse. But here we are, and cars are running, houses are being painted white, and we have survived, and we have survived better for it. We are healthier for it. So why, how much more time do you need? Do you need 10 more years? Will you be at that stage in 10 years where we can say, now it's good? Or will you wait until there is an actual deadline to actually start making the changes that we actually need?
Okay, there was no question, I guess.
Yes, there is a question.
How long time we need?
How much time do you need?
One more question. Last one. Not repeating who has scored that corner there.
Thank you. I'm Hanna Huikkala. I work in arms trade in Finland. I'm a reservist myself, and in addition to that, I do shooting sports. My question is related to the risk management as well as the derogation that is intended to be put in place for police, military, and security purposes, including reservists. So at the moment, these authorities, and especially reservists, oftentimes rely on the training facilities at local shooting range. So my question is that how is this derogation supposed to be effectively applied while simultaneously avoiding cleaning and infrastructure updates that could be hard to do for the local shooting range? And how is this balance supposed to be found? Thank you.
Very good question. I signed that question. And hand it over to you, and then we.
Yeah, this was indeed discussed at length before we prepared the proposal, because it was a concern by a few Nordic countries, including Finland. And at the beginning, the ECA's opinion was proposing risk management measures also for the shooting ranges with bullets. And this was the initial idea of the Commission, to propose risk management measures also for these. But after the discussion and understanding the need for reservists to train in civilian shooting ranges, this is why now the shooting ranges with bullets, they are completely exempted. And with the discussion we had with Finland, apparently this was solving the issue for the training of reservists. What we still have with the risk management measures are the shooting ranges with gunshot, also because the emissions there are much, much larger than those of the shooting ranges with bullets. And here we propose a less stringent requirement than what was proposed by ECA, but still, I mean, we are interested to hear from the sport federations what is really causing a problem, as it was which ones of the specific risk management measures are so expensive that they cannot be implemented. Also because we don't impose to implement all of them. We tell them you can choose 2 of the different containment measures. So it's still a way to find a balance between reducing as much as possible the emissions from gunshots and still having not so much financial burden on the shooting ranges. But for the training of reservists, and the issue was mostly, in my understanding, for the bullets. And we have solved it with a complete exemption.
You want to respond? Very quick, very sweet one.
Yes, just was to say that what you say, Soriga, at the end, it's not true. We reply to all call of evidence. We reply the 19th December with 3 documents where we explain in document 3, and I can show you that there is a risk for the supply chain for the ammunition. Same thing in the reply for the public consultation in July 21. We say exactly in point 9, because it was something we need to have, that there is a risk. We have explained all of this, but we never succeed to open a clear discussion about the technical thing and the time we have pushed at the end.
Well, thank you very much for the presenters. Thank you for very good questions and points of view. As I take it, there are still outstanding issues which need to be discussed, and believe me, from the European Parliament side with my colleagues, we will have it under the careful scrutiny to make it as balanced as possible, because everybody understands that to poison ourselves is not the good idea. But on the other hand, in Europe, there's a war, and a apply bullet kills pretty effectively if it comes from the Russian side. So that we need to take into consideration today in the times of war. I hope we will stay in a good discussion. I hope we will have this type of events again. I'm really happy that so many people took the time. I hope it was useful. If not, please complain. I will not respond. And wish you all good way home if you came from the far away, or enjoy your coffee or tea back home behind the screens. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I liked it.